This girl accidentally went mountain climbing in a deserted place where no one had ever returned alive. The extreme heat and dangerous conditions had completely drained her. The story begins with a girl named Sorel, seen climbing a massive mountain in a harsh, barren area. She had been wandering there for days, but still couldn't find a way down. The blazing heat made her dizzy, and at times she felt like jumping off the mountain to end her misery. She had injured her leg and could barely walk, and to make things worse, one of her shoes had fallen off the cliff. Out of frustration, she threw away the other one too, leaving her to walk barefoot through that deadly terrain. But things were not as they appeared. The story then flashes back to a few weeks earlier, before Sorel ever started this trip. She used to be a well-balanced girl, but after her parents fell ill and she couldn't afford their treatment, her life started to fall apart. She became deeply disturbed and got into bad habits, doing drugs and drinking heavily. She sank so low that she began sleeping with random strangers. Amid all this, she met a man she liked and eventually married him, but unsurprisingly, her marriage didn't last long because of her destructive behavior. After the divorce, Sorel was left alone and heartbroken. She cried constantly and fell into deep depression, unsure how to move forward in life. If things continued like this, she knew she'd never rebuild her family and would remain alone forever. Then, in the middle of this chaos, Sorel discovered she was pregnant, but the bigger question was, whose child was it? She had been with so many people that she had no idea. She wasn't ready to be a mother, so she decided to get an abortion. One of her close friends, who had always guided her, couldn't bear to see Sorel suffering from depression and anxiety. She suggested that Sorel go on a solo trip to clear her mind. Her friend told her about a remote mountain area perfect for hiking and camping, a one-week journey that she'd have to take alone. Maybe there, she would realize how valuable her life truly was. Although Sorel had no experience in hiking or camping, she agreed to go after hearing her friend's advice. She packed all her hiking gear and supplies and set off into the wild, unaware of the dangers waiting for her. These were challenges that could easily cost her life. But instead of just watching her story, we're going to imagine ourselves in Sorel's place, deciding what we would do in her situation, using expert survival skills to make it through every obstacle. So without wasting any time, we begin this long journey with Sorel. After finally reaching the desolate mountain region, she began her trek. The area was filled with strange-looking rocky cliffs that she had to climb. Sorel carried a huge backpack full of essential items, so heavy that it slowed her down, but she knew she'd need everything inside to survive. After hours of traveling, she grew exhausted and began to wonder if coming here had been a mistake. Going back wasn't an option since it was getting dark. Drenched in sweat, she decided to stop and set up camp. After resting inside her tent, she thought of heating up something to eat. She always carried a small notebook with her, where she wrote down every experience she went through. That night too, she wrote about what was happening to her, trying to capture every moment of her struggle in the wilderness. When she unpacked her things inside the tent to heat her food, she realized that while she had brought the stove, she had forgotten to pack the gas canister needed to light it. Instead, she had mistakenly brought something else. That meant she couldn't cook her food. Frustrated by her mistake, Sorel grew angry with herself. It was her first time mountain climbing, and she had already made several errors right from the start. If things continued this way, she might not survive for long. Still, since she had already begun the journey, she had no choice but to see it through to the end. Night had fallen, and she was completely alone in the desolate wilderness. The temperature dropped sharply, but thankfully she had brought extra clothes, which she wore before curling up inside the tent to sleep. She was scared, but somehow managed to calm herself down. Days passed in the barren terrain, and one morning, Sorel continued her journey, exhausted and weary. She ate very little each day, rationing her supplies carefully because the remaining food was her only lifeline. She had decided in advance how much she would eat daily so that her limited provisions would last longer. If her food ran out, she'd be forced to rely on natural resources, things that tasted terrible and barely edible. Slowly, her days dragged on as she kept walking endlessly, feeling like she would never reach her destination. In fact, she still hadn't even made it to the actual mountain region yet. One day, while walking along a dusty path, she spotted a tractor driven by an old man. Relieved, she rushed toward him and explained that she needed help. It was late at night, and she was terrified. The old man stared at her for a while before saying, "I'm finishing some work, you can wait in my car." Sorel had no other option, so she sat inside his vehicle and waited. As the night grew darker, she began to feel uneasy after noticing a gun lying inside the car. Moments later, the old man returned, got into the car, and started asking her questions. Sorel told him she was a tourist who had lost her way and just needed help for the night. Out of fear, she lied, saying her husband was also traveling with her and would arrive soon. The old man simply nodded and drove her to his home. Inside, Sorel was surprised to find that he lived with his wife. Seeing the woman made her feel a bit safer and more comfortable. The couple quickly prepared dinner and invited Sorel to join them. After days of barely eating, she couldn't resist the delicious, home-cooked food and ate hungrily, savoring every bite. That night, she stayed at their home, finally getting some rest. The next morning, the kind old man drove her back to the point where she could continue her journey. Sorel realized that her assumptions about him had been wrong. The couple had treated her with genuine kindness. As she moved forward on her path, though, she couldn't shake the feeling that she might have lost her way again. The scorching heat was unbearable, and her heavy backpack only made things worse. After walking for a while, she set up her tent and cooked a hot meal for herself. This time, she had proper equipment, thanks to the supplies she had gotten from the old man. After so many days, finally eating a freshly cooked meal brought her a sense of satisfaction. Once she had eaten to her fill and rested, she resumed her journey. Eventually, she began to see the outlines of the mountainous region she had been heading toward. But with the mountains came new dangers, ones Sorel had no idea were waiting for her. As she continued hiking, she suddenly came face to face with a deadly creature, a venomous snake common in this wilderness. It was most likely a Russell's viper, one of the most poisonous snakes in the world. A single drop of its venom could kill a human instantly. Terrified, Sorel screamed and stumbled backward, rushing away in panic. She hastily pitched her tent again, but the image of the snake haunted her. She kept imagining it slithering toward her, ready to strike at any moment. And it wasn't just snakes, strange noises surrounded her tent, and she could hear wild animals moving in the dark, circling around. Poor Sorel was terrified. It was her first time in such a place, and now it felt like every creature out there wanted to attack her. But what if someone else were in her position, trapped in a dangerous wilderness surrounded by wild animals? How could they survive? Experts suggest that when facing a deadly Russell's viper, the first thing is to observe its posture. If the snake is coiled tightly, forming an S shape, it's ready to attack. But if it's slithering away, it's not in an aggressive mood. Still, keeping your distance is crucial. Russell's vipers are incredibly fast and can strike from several feet away in an instant. Even if you come across a dead one, never touch its head. Scientists have observed that the reflexes can remain active for hours after death, and even a severed head can still bite and inject venom. As for other wild animals that might attack your campsite, one simple method of protection is to create a boundary around your tent using strong-smelling substances like gasoline or urine, scents that repel most animals. The safest option, though, is to keep a fire burning. Wild animals are instinctively afraid of fire, and if any come close, waving a burning torch can scare them away. However, constant vigilance is necessary. One must take turns resting and keeping watch throughout the night. Sorel, now completely exhausted and terrified, somehow managed to survive the night at her campsite. Luckily, she had a flashlight, which she used to scare away some of the smaller creatures. After following all these precautions, she finally made it through the night. The next morning, she set off again with her heavy backpack, her body aching but her heart slightly lifted. She had made it to the mountain range at last. From a height, she spotted a man bathing in a river below. Curious and relieved to see another human being, she went down to talk to him. The man introduced himself as Greg and told her that he was also a solo hiker exploring these rocky terrains. Greg was impressed that Sorel, a woman traveling alone, had dared to take on such a challenge. It showed her incredible courage. He told her about a hidden camping spot higher up in the mountains and suggested they meet there later, saying there would be fun and company. Hearing that, Sorel felt a sense of relief. She wasn't the only traveler in this lonely wilderness. They both went their separate ways, planning to meet again at the spot Greg mentioned. As she continued climbing through the rugged hills, Sorel began to feel something new. She was finally starting to enjoy the adventure. After climbing steadily for hours, Sorel finally reached the hiding area Greg had told her about. The place was lively, filled with other travelers and hikers from different parts of the world. Soon, she found Greg there, surrounded by his friends, who he introduced to her warmly. Sorel chatted with them for a long time, sharing stories about her journey and the strange things she had seen so far. Once, she had wanted to return home, scared and hopeless in that barren land, but now, everything felt different. She was beginning to love the journey. Traveling made her feel alive again, filling her with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. At that camp, Sorel received a parcel, sent by her best friend. Inside were supplies she might need for the rest of her trip. As she unpacked the box, she found something unexpected, a letter from her ex-husband. Somehow, he had learned about her long, lonely journey through the wilderness and wanted to congratulate her for having the courage to do it all alone. But reading his words made Sorel's heart heavy. Deep down, she still wished he had been by her side. She knew her own mistakes had driven him away, and that thought filled her with quiet sadness. While sitting alone, lost in thought, she met an older man named Eddie, the caretaker of that mountain area. He noticed Sorel's large, overloaded backpack and asked why she was carrying so much gear by herself. Gently, he explained that she didn't need to haul everything, only the essentials. He helped her unpack and remove unnecessary items to lighten her load. Then he examined her shoes and noticed that her laces were tied far too tightly. The tighter you tie them, the more your feet swell and blister, he explained. He advised her to wear sandals or open footwear instead, to let air flow and prevent injuries. Eddie even suggested she buy a new pair of hiking shoes. After listening carefully and resting for a while, Sorel felt grateful for his help. She contacted her friend, asking her to send a new pair of shoes as soon as possible. Until then, she'd have to make do with the ones she had. Before leaving, Eddie pointed out two possible routes ahead, one through a snowy path and another through the dry, rocky desert. He strongly advised her to take the rocky route, even if it was longer, because the snow-covered path was extremely dangerous. But Sorel's adventurous spirit got the better of her. Despite Eddie's warning, she decided to take the snowy route. She geared up with her snow equipment and started trekking forward, excited and determined. It seemed that danger thrilled her more than safety. She knew the risks but wanted to challenge herself anyway. Days passed as she continued her long, exhausting journey. After finally crossing the icy terrain, Sorel sat down on a rock to rest and looked at her swollen, injured feet. One of them was badly wounded and throbbing in pain. As she tried to take off her shoe, it suddenly slipped from her hand and tumbled down the cliff below, disappearing into the vast white snow beneath her. Sorel couldn't jump down the cliff to get her fallen shoe, so out of frustration, she threw the other one away too. And now, you can tell, this was the same moment shown at the beginning of the story. From here, her real troubles were about to begin. Her journey had just become even harder, as every step now caused her pain. Thankfully, Eddie had given her his small pair of sandals, and wearing those, she continued moving forward. After walking for hours, she finally reached the next station, where she could collect her parcel and rest for a while. She quickly checked the package her friend had sent. It contained a new pair of shoes, and she sat down to have a small breakfast to regain her strength. But even now, half her journey still lay ahead. Sorel decided to stay overnight at a nearby farmhouse. While resting there, her mind drifted back into painful memories from her past. Through her flashbacks, we learn that Sorel's father was an extremely cruel man. He treated his family horribly, especially her mother, whom he often beat. One day, unable to take it anymore, Sorel's mother ran away with her two children, hoping to start a better life somewhere else. But soon after, tragedy struck. Sorel's mother was diagnosed with cancer. Her condition worsened rapidly, and in the end, she passed away. That was the moment Sorel's life started to spiral out of control. Instead of staying with her brother and trying to rebuild, she went down a darker path, getting involved with drugs and fleeting relationships. Even after getting married, she couldn't stay loyal to her husband. He eventually caught her with other men, and that was the breaking point. He filed for divorce, and everything fell apart. It was all Sorel's fault, and deep down, she knew it. She had destroyed her own life, one that many others could only dream of having. And now, after all those mistakes, she was out here, crossing the harsh, deserted lands alone, trying to find some meaning again. Back in the present, Sorel kept moving forward, a faint smile appearing on her face. It was clear that she was finally close to her destination. After crossing the rocky terrain, success was almost within reach. But as she traveled through the wide, sun-scorched desert, she realized something alarming. Her water supply was completely gone. That was terrible news because the desert stretched on for miles, and without water, she would die of dehydration long before reaching safety. She pushed on, her body weakening with every step, until she spotted a large iron tank in the distance. Running toward it, she desperately checked inside, but it was empty. Her strength was fading fast, and the heavy backpack felt impossible to carry any longer. Just when it seemed like she might collapse, she saw a small puddle of water up ahead. Excited, she rushed toward it, only to find it was filthy and undrinkable. But Sorel had learned a lot during her time out here. She knew survival tricks now. She filled 2 cans with the dirty water and dropped purification tablets inside them. Let's go into detail here. Those tablets are chlorine, iodine, or sodium dichloroisocyanurate tablets, specifically made to purify unsafe water. The process is simple: 1 tablet for every liter of water, then wait 30 minutes before drinking. If you don't have those, there's another method, using regular household bleach. Since bleach contains sodium hypochlorite, you can add just 2 drops per liter of water, mix it well, and let it sit for half an hour to make it safe to drink. Sorel had managed to prepare her drinking water when suddenly, two hunters appeared from the distance. They lived in that region and hunted wild animals for survival. The men approached her and said, "Can you share some of that water with us?" But Sorel refused to share her water. There simply wasn't enough clean water to go around. Something about those hunters felt off to her. Their eyes were filled with a predatory glare that made her uneasy. Feeling unsafe, she decided to leave the area immediately. She grabbed her backpack and took a different trail. After a while, the two hunters also wandered away, unaware that Sorel was still hiding behind the bushes nearby. Once they were gone, she returned to collect the rest of her purified water. She planned to camp there for the night, but one of the hunters unexpectedly came back. He asked, "Weren't you leaving?" Sorel didn't reply. She quietly packed up her gear and walked away. Fear crept in as she wondered whether those men might follow her and try to hurt her. But she refused to give up. After walking for hours, she finally reached a small city built on a modest scale. While traveling through the streets, she met a man named Jonathan, who was looking for a partner to attend a party with. Wanting a brief escape from her exhaustion, Sorel agreed to go with him. That night, the two got close and spent the evening together. The next morning, Sorel left again, back into the forest, heading toward the rainforests where heavy rainfall drenched everything around. Inside the dense jungle, she met a group of tourists traveling together. They welcomed her warmly, shared their food with her, and spent the night talking. Sorel, who loved writing poetry, recited some of her poems for them, and they listened with admiration. Wherever she went, Sorel managed to make new friends and touch people's hearts. The next morning, her route diverged from theirs, so she said goodbye and continued on her own. As she hiked deeper into the wilderness, she noticed a llama carrying several bags. Nearby, an elderly woman appeared with her young son. Curious, the woman asked Sorel what she was doing there. Sorel explained that she was a traveler exploring the region. The boy began asking her many questions, about her family, about her mother. Sorel told him honestly that her mother had died of illness, and that she missed her deeply. The boy, saddened by her story, said a short prayer and recited a poem that touched Sorel's heart. The poem spoke of how souls never truly die, they return to nature and are reunited with those they love one day. Hearing this moved Sorel deeply. After talking for a while, the woman and her son left, and Sorel continued toward her final destination. Along the way, thoughts of her mother flooded her mind. She realized how many mistakes she had made, how careless and selfish she had been. She could have stayed with her mother, cared for her, and lived a good life. Instead, she had thrown everything away, including her family and her brother. By now, more than 100 days had passed since she began this journey. She never imagined she could travel so far. Before this, she had no real experience with hiking or camping, but she had learned through struggle and pain. Finally, she reached the point where the forest and mountain paths ended. Ahead of her stood a massive bridge, one that connected two nations. On the other side of that bridge was a city, her home. At last, Sorel arrived at the bridge, the final mark of her journey. Standing there, she gazed at the horizon, remembering the early days when this trek had just been a distant idea, a desperate escape. Back then, she hadn't believed she could last even a single day. But now, after all these long days and nights, she had made it. Her journey was complete, filled with lessons and pain and growth. Sorel finally accepted that most of her suffering had come from her own choices. As she looked out over the vast landscape, her past mistakes flashed before her eyes, the betrayals, the regrets, the recklessness. Yet, it was clear now, she was no longer that same broken woman. The Sorel standing on that bridge was changed, stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. She began to see the world around her with an entirely new perspective, one that was deeply fascinating and full of meaning. Every challenge, every hardship she faced throughout her journey was carefully written down in her diary. That small habit, which once seemed insignificant, would later become the key to her success. Looking at Sorel now, no one could have guessed that she was once so broken and lost. This long journey had completely transformed her from within. As she sat on the snowy hillside, she noticed a fox slowly approaching from the distance, its curious eyes fixed on her. Watching the creature, Sorel suddenly remembered the young boy's words, that a soul never truly dies but becomes one with nature. In that moment, she believed the fox wasn't just an animal, it was her mother's spirit, coming to see her one last time. With tears in her eyes, Sorel thanked her mother from the bottom of her heart, and the gentle fox quietly walked away into the snow. Gathering her belongings, Sorel finally made her way out of the icy region and back home. The most astonishing thing was that the diary where she had recorded all her experiences eventually became a best-selling book. People were deeply moved by her story, her struggles, her courage, her transformation. Within a short time, Sorel's popularity soared, and she decided to dedicate her life to writing. She went on to publish many more books, each one reaching new heights of success. Sorel's life had changed completely. She remarried, built a loving family, and became a devoted wife and mother. Years later, she had everything she once thought she'd lost: a home, peace, and purpose. This story is actually based on a true event, on the life of an American woman named Sorel. It teaches a powerful message: even when every door seems closed and life feels completely lost, faith and perseverance can lead you out of the darkness. Just like Sorel, anyone can rebuild their life and rediscover joy. And with that, our story comes to an end.